Good afternoon to everyone in the US and good evening to everybody in Europe. My name is Ryan Sherba. I am the founding editor of Balkan Insider. Founded in 2017, Balkan Insider is the only newsletter based in Washington, D.C. focused on the region. Our loyal regular readership includes US State Department officials, international diplomats, congressional leaders, academics, diaspora leaders, and more. You can check us out at www.balkaninsider.com to sign up for our Monday to Thursday newsletter to start your morning off with the top news from the region. Today, we're joined by a very special guest who needs very little introduction. Deputy Assistant Secretary for State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Matthew Palmer. He is currently a member of the Senior Foreign Service with the rank of Counselor. In his role as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, he has the responsibility for the Western Balkans and the Aegean. He also serves as the State Department's Special Representative to the Western Balkans. Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer began his career in the Foreign Service at the U.S. Embassy in Belgrade in 1993 before joining the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Across multiple roles, he has served as desk officer for the former Yugoslavia, director for Europe on the National Security Council, postings in Cyprus, second tour in Belgrade. He also served as the director for multilateral affairs in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, and director of South Central European Affairs. He graduated from Wesleyan University with a bachelor's in East Asian Studies. In addition, he has a master's in Japanese Studies from the University of Michigan and a Master of Science in National Security Strategy from the National War College. Somehow between all of this, he found time to write 4 novels. So, Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer, the floor is yours for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity. Let me put in a plug for the Balkan Insider while I'm at it. A longtime reader, first-time caller. It's the first thing I read in the morning, and I really do appreciate the service that you provide, collecting so much of the information that's out there and putting in one easy to access place for those of us who care about this region. It's a great opportunity for me to be with you here today. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the Western Balkans. Most recently, an agreement in Bosnia and Herzegovina that will make it possible for the people of Mostar to vote for the first time in a dozen years. That's a significant development, really a tremendous step forward for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in particular for the people of Mostar. But we also have the recent decision on the part of the European Council to greenlight the opening of accession negotiations for North Macedonia and Albania. We have the June 5th agreement in Albania on electoral reform. There have been a number of elections in the Western Balkans, and the countries of the Western Balkans are continuing on their European path with the full support of the United States and the European Union. We've had a relaunch of the dialogue process between Belgrade and Pristina, being spearheaded by the EEAS and Miroslav Lajcak, a dear and close friend and collaborator of mine for many years. Happy to see that process re-engaged. I recently met here in Washington with the representative of Kosovo to that process, Skender Hyseni, the technical lead for Kosovo. There's a lot of work to do, but the parties are committed to engaging seriously, making progress. A comprehensive agreement on normalization would go a long way towards resetting the region and encouraging all of the countries of the Western Balkans on their European path. So with that as kind of a broad introduction, happy to talk about whatever it is that's on your mind, take this conversation in whatever direction you and your readers would like to take it.
Sure, and thank you to everybody who wrote. We got some fantastic feedback for questions and whatnot, so thanks everybody, and glad that they could be a part of the conversation as well. So to start that off, there was much discussion about potential land swaps between Kosovo and Serbia. Serbian President Vučić kept talking about delineation between Serbs and Albanians, while the Kosovar side remained steadfast that borders are not up for question. Meanwhile, Bosnian Serb member of the presidency, Milorad Dodik, he's consistently asked Vučić to link Republika Srpska to these talks. So it's clear there could be a ripple effect throughout the region if there's some sort of land swap or something of that aspect. So what is your view on that, and on land swaps in the region, and what potential dangers there could be?
I mean, honestly, Ryan, our focus is on supporting a process, an EU-led negotiation leading to a comprehensive agreement on normalizing the relationships between Serbia and Kosovo that ideally has at its center mutual recognition. Talk about land or any other particular aspect of a potential agreement, I think, is distracting from the core goal, which is to get the parties together and get the Belgrade and Pristina, the governments of Kosovo, the government of Serbia, sitting down, working this stuff through and identifying a path forward to normalization. And we're supporting that process. So I really do think it is somewhat irrelevant and largely distracting to be talking about issues like land swaps. What's really important is how can we work to get the parties moving forward towards a comprehensive agreement that for once and for all resolves these challenges.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Now moving a bit south, North Macedonia just had their parliamentary elections. The weekend coalition with SDSM and BESA, they narrowly edged out Vomedo Diplomanaa, while ethnic Albanian Dewey came in third on the slogan "Why Not," alluding to a potential first ethnic Albanian prime minister. What would you say is the top priority, should be the top priority for political actors in bringing the coalition together?
First of all, let me congratulate North Macedonia and the people of North Macedonia for successfully conducting elections in what is a difficult and a challenging environment. But the elections were held, they were held successfully. Now, as really in any parliamentary system, you enter the period of coalition negotiations. This is a natural part of the parliamentary democratic process. And from the perspective of the United States, what's important for us, what we would emphasize is that we're looking for a good, strong partner in a government in North Macedonia, a government that is committed to taking maximum advantage of North Macedonia's NATO membership, a government that is committed to moving North Macedonia further on the path towards eventual membership in the European Union, a government that is committed to implementing the Prespa agreement and to working to advance peace and prosperity for all of the citizens of North Macedonia. And whatever government emerges out of the coalition negotiations, if they're committed to those goals, we'll find a strong and committed partner in the United States.
Excellent. Another country that recently held parliamentary elections was Serbia on June 21st. The opposition boycotted the elections, leading to a landslide for President Vucic's Serbian Progressive Party. Of course, many people saw those images of the protests shown across the world, across Twitter and whatnot, where people were protesting the elections and also the government's response to COVID-19. Meanwhile, the anti-money laundering unit of Serbia's finance ministry just announced investigations into the finances of select civil society organizations and investigative journalists. Bearing this in mind, how would you assess democracy in Serbia? And how concerned is the US about the current trends?
Certainly we're concerned about it. And we took note of Freedom House downgrading Serbia from being a semi-consolidated democracy to a hybrid regime. And Freedom House is well respected and has consistent metrics that it uses in measuring those sorts of issues. Serbia had elections, but the elections did not really offer the Serbian public much in the way of choice. We had argued strongly with the Serbian opposition that they should participate in the elections, and the opposition argued in turn that the electoral conditions were not sufficiently fair, the playing field was not sufficiently level to allow that possibility. We are concerned about the ability of opposition political parties and opposition political figures to have equitable access to the media space, in particular the public broadcaster, RTS. We'd like to see reforms instituted that level the playing field, make it possible for the Serbian public to exercise the legitimate right to choose at the ballot by having a broad range of opportunities that are reflected in the ballot. We're concerned about the perception of justice of the law being applied selectively, targeting civil society and investigative journalists. This is something that will only make it more difficult for Serbia to move forward on its European path. We are strong supporters of Serbia's European future, its European perspective, its eventual membership in the European Union. But getting there, achieving that goal, is going to require that Serbia qualify, including on the issue of democratic reforms. We hope that Belgrade and the Serbian government, Serbian authorities, look to us as partners in this, but there's certainly work to be done.
Sure. And now, moving over to Montenegro, it seems like the whole region at this time just decided to go to elections in the middle of the pandemic. They have parliamentary elections on August 30th, coming up in only a few weeks. The foreign ministry recently accused the Russian Orthodox Church from interfering in its democratic process, which adds to the latest and the long list of Russian meddling in the region. There was the coup attempt in 2017, the mis and disinformation campaigns in North Macedonia during its path to NATO membership. So I guess the question from me is, what can the U.S. and its partners do to tackle the dis and misinformation in the region, particularly in Montenegro?
Yeah, we're doing what we can to help our Montenegrin partners develop the capacity to identify misinformation, disinformation, to recognize when it is that there's an information operation that's being conducted in the Montenegrin space, and then to be able to counter that narrative, to draw people's attention to the external nature of the misinformation, to bring it to people's attention, to put counter narratives forward. Some of that is technical, some of it is developing the capability to manage and monitor the information space, to be able to recognize it. Some of it is about helping develop the counter narratives. And from our perspective, when we see this kind of misinformation campaign or disinformation being employed to effect in Montenegro or elsewhere in the region, we will call it out and we will identify it as what it is. And we will help separate the truth from the falsehood, and make it harder and harder for those who would seek to create a climate of distrust to use information as a weapon.
Thanks. Writing this newsletter every day, it's been sometimes difficult sifting through all of the information from the whole region. Now, something that I'm sure that there are many citizens of Croatia that are wondering about. The Croatia is the only EU country allowing U.S. citizens into the country now, which I think is fantastic. Mm-hmm. I would love to be in Split or in Dubrovnik right now, but I'm stuck here in D.C. It's been profiled by Good Morning America, and numerous news outlets have written about it. On the other hand, Croatia is one of the handful of EU countries required to have a visa to enter the U.S. They still haven't reached that 3% denial threshold to qualify for the visa waiver program. Could you give an update on where Croatia is in that process and how COVID has potentially interfered in that?
COVID's interfered with everything that everyone's trying to do across the board, but Croatia has continued to make progress on filling the criteria, the qualifications that are necessary for membership in the visa waiver program. Just over the last couple of months, there's been progress on a federal air marshals agreement, progress on an extradition treaty, mutual legal assistance treaty that will help make the case. And then, of course, there's the numerical targets that Croatia is working to achieve. I think it would be fabulous if we can make sufficient progress for Croatia to move forward with membership in the visa waiver program, and we will continue to work closely in partnership with our Croatian friends, our Croatian allies, to make certain that there is a clear understanding of the criteria and what's necessary to move forward in that process.
That's great. Is there any timeline on that, or just when the threshold's met, when all the technical agreements are done?
It's not time driven. It's conditions based, and aspirants for membership in the visa waiver program need to qualify by meeting the criteria.
Excellent. And one last thing on Croatia that a lot of people were asking about. A lot of U.S. businesses are actually being hampered from operating in Croatia due to the double taxation treaty. It's a giant hurdle for business to be taxed both in the U.S. and in Croatia. So have you got any updates on that? Foreign Minister Grlić Radman and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke at the Munich Security Conference in February, and Croatia's foreign minister stated that this is something that they hope to be resolved by the end of the year.
Sure. We are strong supporters of close ties between the American business community and the Croatian business community. We'd like to see American businesses in Croatia doing business, making investments. We'd like to see Croatian firms in the United States doing business, making investments. We understand the value that corporations place on predictability in the tax environment. I frankly have never heard from any American businessman that the lack of a double taxation treaty was actually presenting a particular obstacle to business, but I do understand that in principle this is something that would be better to have clarified than not. COVID has again filled up a lot of the space and has engaged a lot of the circuits, the economic policy making circuits in the United States. But again, we understand the importance that our Croatian partners place on this issue, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find a resolution that's mutually agreeable.
Excellent. I might add that I thought that Croatia did a great job during its EU presidency, which was pretty much dominated by COVID-19.
Indeed, and they did do quite an excellent job in quite challenging circumstances, and I think it's right to recognize that and to applaud Croatia's achievements.
So this was an interesting question that somebody wrote in. The Balkans are more than transnational justice, but among its essential activities in the region, the U.S. has been an advocate for transnational justice. For nearly a quarter century, from advocating for the establishment of the ICTY in the UN Security Council in '93 to supporting the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and domestic justice processes today. So can you give your perspective on where those justice processes stand, some of the key developments you've seen in your term as special representative, and where you see them heading and perhaps concluding in the next few years?
Sure. We have been strong supporters of the institutional framework for justice across the board in the Western Balkans, beginning with the ICTY. The Special Court for Kosovo is another institution that has a very particular and specific mandate. We support the court, and we think it's important that Kosovo maintain cooperation with the court. Going forward, I am hopeful that the various institutional frameworks for justice will be able to carry out their missions and mandate, fulfill their mandates, and then ultimately dissolve themselves, and we can continue to pursue the highest standards of justice and law enforcement through domestic institutions.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, it's going to be a long-term legacy of the U.S. in the region at the end of the day. And also, speaking of legacy, this year marks 25 years for many things: the Srebrenica genocide, today Operation Storm, and coming up the Dayton Peace Accords, the signing of those, which brought an end to the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Can you just expand on the significance of this year in general with regards to those events, and particularly with Dayton, what opportunities there are to improve them, to ensure that Bosnia and Herzegovina can continue on its Euro-Atlantic integration?
Absolutely. 1995 was obviously a watershed year in the Western Balkans. My first experience in the Balkans actually began in 1993 when I was posted as a junior officer in Belgrade, and I left Belgrade in July of 1995 and moved to New York, where I started to work as the U.S. mission to the United Nations and continued to stay engaged on Balkans issues. So I remember those events well and clearly. It's very personal for me. I was all part of that process and there at the time. I think the anniversaries that are coming up as part of the 25th year will be significant for the region. It will be significant for those countries who were involved in helping to bring finally peace to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And it will also remind us that the work is not done, that there is still work to do, in particular in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to ensure that the system is functional, that the institutions that were established by Dayton are providing the kinds of services that they're intended to provide, and that the political framework is one that makes it possible for Bosnia and Herzegovina to move forward on its European path. Ultimately, the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, no matter their ethnic identity, aspire to the identity of a European identity, a European perspective, a European future. People in Bosnia and Herzegovina across the board want to be in a position to raise their families, educate their children, put food on the table. They want peace, stability, prosperity, predictability, all the things that all of us want. Dayton has helped to provide that opportunity, but certainly the institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina need to be further strengthened, refined. It needs to be possible for the Bosnian state system to function in a manner that allows it to fulfill the conditions of membership in the European Union. And here again, they can look to us as well as the European Union and the EEAS and the European Commission as strong and committed partners in this.
Excellent. And to be cognizant of your time, there's one last question, and this is a little bit of a plug for you.
Sure, I love that.
You've written 4 novels. I mean, I highly recommend them to everybody. Particularly, I enjoyed The Wolf of Sarajevo. I think that it was fantastic. I read it in about 4 days. So are you working on any new novels at the moment, or?
Yeah, I am. This job is pretty hard. So I don't have as much time as I might like to do with the COVID-19 lockdown. It's given me a little bit more time to think. So I have turned my thoughts to what comes next, and I have an idea that I'm working on, set in Southeast Asia, which is another part of the planet that is near and dear to me. It'll take me a little while, but I am committed to getting back to it, and I would dearly love to write at least one more.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, 5's a great number, right?
It's a nice round number.
So again, thank you for everybody joining us. To be cognizant of Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer's time, we're going to wrap this up. And thank you to everybody who reached out to submit questions. And again, definitely check out Balkan Insider at www.balkaninsider.com. We send the top news from the region to your inbox every day. Usually we say whether you're on a tramway, bus, metro, you could be reading it, but now is probably not the best time to be on those. So thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you for everybody for tuning in.
Very much appreciate the opportunity.